right, let's jump right in to a deep dive, on a shocking true crime case from Malaysia.
Oh, this is going to be good.
You bet it is. Our listener sent us, well, they sent us a YouTube video.
Okay.
The title's a mouthful. It's Muslim Wife's Secret Sex Affair with Father-in-Law Leads to Tragic Murder True Crime Story. That's from the channel Truth in the Dark.
Okay.
And they also sent in this little snippet from Pace Magazine, like their list, the 50 best serial killer movies of all time.
Now that's an interesting combo.
Yeah, so you're probably thinking, what on earth do serial killer movies have to do with, well, a real-life murder in Malaysia?
Right, yeah.
That's exactly what we're going to unpack today.
I love it.
Get ready, because we're going deep, on this journey, and we're going to be talking about forbidden love, betrayal, and the powerful influence of cultural expectations, and how all of this just culminates in, in this tragic act of violence.
You've definitely piqued my interest.
Perfect. So to start, that YouTube video from Truth in the Dark, it really focuses on how she's a Malaysian woman who had an affair with, get this, her father-in-law, Rahim.
Oh, wow.
While her husband, Fizel, was away, like on business trips.
Oh, I see.
When Fizel finds out, things get out of control really quickly. And, well, it ends with him killing Rahim.
Tragic.
It really is.
Yeah.
Both Fizel and Hawa, they end up convicted, for their roles in all of this.
It's interesting how the video frames the story,
Yeah.
It uses words like betrayal and shame. And it's almost like they're suggesting that what Hawa and Rahim did was more than just like a personal thing. It was like this transgression against like their whole community and their faith.
That makes sense, given the setting.
Exactly. This is Malaysia we're talking about, a conservative Muslim society where honor and shame, they're not just words, they carry a lot of weight.
Yeah, it's like their affair, it was this crack in the foundation of their whole family and their community, a crack that, well, ultimately leads to this chasm of violence.
Powerful imagery.
You're right, that cultural context, it adds a whole other dimension to this story.
Yeah, absolutely.
It makes you think, what kind of pressures was Hawa facing? What led her to, to make these choices, knowing what could happen?
That's the million-dollar question.
It is, isn't it?
We can only speculate.
Right.
But it's crucial to consider the position of women, in a society like that.
Yeah.
Traditional gender roles, religious expectations, this pressure to maintain a certain image of respectability, like everything's fine.
A facade.
Exactly. All of these factors, they could played a part in Hawa's choices and, well, ultimately led to this tragic end.
It's almost like she was trapped.
Yes.
In this web of societal expectations and this affair. It was like this desperate attempt to break free.
Right.
Even if it meant risking everything.
It's a classic case of forbidden love with tragic consequences.
And then there's Fizel.
Yeah.
The video, it really paints him as this victim of betrayal. But is that the whole story? I mean, is there more to it?
Well, that's where the psychology of violence comes into play.
Okay.
And this might sound strange, but those serial killer movies you mentioned, they might actually give us some unexpected insights.
Really?
Yeah, I know it sounds far-fetched.
It does, a little.
I mean, these movies are often fictional.
Right.
And exaggerated.
Of course.
But they delve into the minds of killers, often showing us troubled pasts, anxieties, or even societal pressures, things that might have led them to do what they did.
Okay, but Fizel wasn't a serial killer.
No, of course not.
So how does that apply?
We can still use those examples, those cinematic examples, to try and examine Fizel's motivations.
So even though Fizel's violence was like a one-time thing?
Yeah.
You're suggesting that we can learn something by looking at the patterns we see in serial killer movies.
Exactly. There are common threads, believe it or not.
I have to admit, I'm intrigued.
Good. Think about Psycho, for example.
Okay.
Norman Bates, remember him? The seemingly normal motel owner.
Right.
But he's got a dark secret.
He's a product of a really messed up relationship with his mother.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's nothing to suggest that Fizel had a split personality like Norman.
Okay.
But we can still draw some parallels.
You mean in terms of like repressed emotions and then this sudden outburst of violence?
Exactly. The video mentions that Fizel was often away, on those business trips.
Yeah.
Perhaps he was neglecting Hawa emotionally.
Okay.
Maybe he just bottled up his insecurities, frustrations, created this pressure cooker situation, that just explodes in a moment of rage.
Chilling.
It is, isn't it?
It's like those sources, the true crime video and that serial killer movie list, they're starting to come together like pieces of a puzzle.
They are, aren't they?
Yeah.
And we're starting to get a clearer picture of this complex case. And that's just the beginning.
There's more.
Oh, there's so much more to unpack.
Can't wait.
We've barely scratched the surface of this story.
Okay, so where do we go from here?
Well, we need to delve deeper into the psychology of betrayal.
Talk about the influence of cultural norms and how all these things might have collided to create this perfect storm of tragedy.
This is going to be good.
Oh, you bet it is. So we were talking about Norman Bates.
I'm Psycho.
Yeah, and how his story, even though it's extreme,
Right.
it might give us a way to understand what was going on with Faisal mentally.
Yeah, it's amazing how a fictional character can, help us understand a real case like this.
It really is. It's about seeing the patterns, the
Yeah.
underlying motivations.
Mhm.
Remember, these serial killer movies, even the crazy ones,
Yeah.
they tap into these very real anxieties, these psychological issues that people actually have.
Yeah.
They might exaggerate things to make it more dramatic,
Right.
but the main themes, they often connect with real life situations.
Okay, so we've got Norman Bates, as a possible way to understand Faisal's struggles.
Exactly.
What about Hawa?
Ah, yes. How?
Are there any, movie parallels that can help us understand her choices?
This is where things get really interesting. We need to go beyond just one person and think about the societal pressures.
Right, especially in a conservative Muslim community like that.
Precisely.
The YouTube video, it makes it clear
Yeah.
that their affair wasn't just a personal thing,
No, not at all.
It was a violation of cultural and religious norms,
Big time.
a source of deep shame for their families, for the whole community.
Exactly. And that's where a movie like The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, believe it or not, might be surprisingly relevant.
Hold on. I know.
It is.
The Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yeah.
The one with Leatherface and the whole, cannibal family.
Yeah.
How does that even come close to this case?
Think about it this way. Isolation.
Isolation.
Yeah, and the breakdown of family and societal bonds.
Okay.
You see, in that movie, you've got this family that's totally cut off, living by their own crazy rules.
Right.
Now, obviously, Hawa wasn't literally isolated like that.
Yeah.
But the video suggests that she was emotionally isolated, in her marriage. Faisal traveling all the time, it left her feeling neglected.
That makes sense.
And her affair, it pushed her even further away from her community, her faith.
So you're saying that both Hawa and those characters in Texas Chainsaw Massacre,
Yeah.
they're dealing with this sense of disconnect,
Yes.
this lack of belonging, even if it shows up in completely different ways.
Exactly. You're getting it.
Wow.
Those feelings of isolation, they can push people to do desperate things.
Yeah.
Even if it leads to terrible consequences.
Right.
In Hawa's case, it might have pushed her towards this relationship.
The affair?
Yeah, seeking connection in this forbidden place,
That's a powerful way to look at it.
It is, isn't it?
It's like both Psycho and Texas Chainsaw Massacre,
Right.
despite all the graphic stuff, the crazy storylines,
Of course.
they offer these glimpses into this dark side of human nature.
Absolutely.
The lengths that people will go to when they're driven by desperation,
Yeah.
isolation, or these pent-up emotions.
You hit the nail on the head.
So it's like those two sources,
Yeah.
the true crime video and that list of serial killer movies.
Yeah, they actually complement each other in this really interesting way.
I'm starting to see it,
The video, it gives us the facts.
the hard facts.
But the movies, they let us explore these extreme personalities
Mhm.
and situations so we get a better idea of the psychological and societal forces at play.
It's like they're two sides of the same coin.
I like that.
One is grounded in reality. The other is exploring these darker possibilities of what people are capable of.
Mm-hmm.
And when you look at both sides, you get a much deeper, more complex understanding of this whole situation.
Couldn't have said it better myself. The movies, they help us go beyond just judging the characters.
Yeah.
And instead, they make us consider the complexity of their choices, the pressures they were under, and the warning signs that maybe everyone missed.
It's like a wake-up call.
It is. A reminder that violence, whether it's one act of passion or a serial killer's rampage, it's never a simple thing. There are always layers of context, motivation, and societal influence that lead to the final act.
That's a really crucial point,
It is.
especially when we think about the moral ambiguity that the YouTube video presents.
Right.
It uses language that frames Hawa and Rahim as the ones who caused the tragedy,
Highlighting their betrayal and their shame.
Exactly.
But is that the whole picture?
That's the question, isn't it?
It is.
Because even though what they did was wrong,
Of course.
we can't ignore the context.
We can't.
What about Fazil's emotional neglect? What about the societal pressures that might have influenced Hawa's choices? The video, it doesn't really dig into those details.
And that's where exploring these movies can be so helpful.
How so?
They encourage us to look deeper, to consider the gray areas, and to ask ourselves, were there other things going on that could have led to this?
That's a good point.
Right.
It's a reminder that even in a clear case of murder,
Yeah.
figuring out who's to blame and understanding why they did it it's not always so easy.
It's complex.
There's this whole web of choices, societal pressures, and unexpected outcomes that all come together in the end.
And that's what makes this deep dive so fascinating, you know?
Yeah.
We're not just retelling a true crime story.
We're going way deeper.
We're using those sources you provided to unravel this complicated human behavior.
It's like peeling back the layers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exploring the dark corners of the mind and gaining a deeper understanding of what shapes our choices.
Wow.
And ultimately, our destinies.
You know, it's funny.
What's that?
As we've been, talking about this whole case,
Yeah.
I can't help but think,
Okay.
what would this look like as a movie?
Ooh, interesting.
It's got all the elements of a thriller,
Yeah.
forbidden love, this simmering rage,
Mm-hmm.
this shocking violence, and that
Yeah.
cultural backdrop.
Right.
It just adds a layer of, I don't know, mystery.
Intrigue.
Yeah, that you don't often see in Hollywood.
You're right, the setting itself, it's ripe for exploration.
Yeah.
Imagine a film that really dives into the complexity of Malaysian society.
Ooh, yeah.
The weight of tradition, the clash between modern desires and those conservative values.
Right. Yeah.
This whole intricate dance of honor and shame.
Exactly.
It could be so much more than just a typical whodunit.
Oh, for sure.
It could be this character study,
Yeah.
a deep dive into each person, their motivations.
The secrets.
Exactly. We could see Fizel struggling with his suspicions,
Right.
how wrestling with her desires and the guilt of what she did,
And right,
caught in the middle of it all.
this is getting good.
And the film wouldn't need all that graphic violence or cheap thrills to be effective.
No.
The tension it could build slowly
Yeah, so
through like stolen glances, whispered conversations,
Oh.
a feeling that something's off.
like under the surface.
Exactly, permeating everything.
I'm getting chills just thinking about it.
See.
You could have scenes that focus on the unspoken tension within the family.
Oh, I like that.
Awkward silences at dinner, these forced smiles,
Right.
this feeling that something is really wrong.
Yes. Beneath this facade of a perfect life.
Exactly.
And then slowly you reveal the cracks.
Yes.
The resentment, the pressure building up.
Oh, so
It explodes in that act of violence.
wow.
Right.
And the aftermath,
Oof.
the family falling apart, the community dealing with the scandal.
It'd be heavy.
It would be a powerful statement about the destructive nature of secrets, the consequences of betrayal.
Exactly.
You could even explore the legal side of things.
Oh, absolutely.
Betrayal, cultural attitudes towards infidelity, honor killings. Maybe even touch on how Malaysia's legal system works.
Oh, that's a good one.
It blends secular and Islamic law.
Fascinating.
This is what I love about our deep dives.
Me too.
We started with a true crime case and this list of, seemingly unrelated movies.
Right.
And now we're imagining this whole complex, thought-provoking film.
It's amazing.
That could explore social issues, cultural nuances.
It's the psychology of violence.
All of it.
It just goes to show
What's that?
that even the darkest stories can teach us something,
Make us question our assumptions.
Explore the full range of human experience.
Well said.
Thanks.
So to our listener who sent us these sources, thank you
Yeah, thank
for
you.
inspiring this amazing conversation.
It's been quite a journey.
We went from murder in Malaysia to a deep dive into the psychology of betrayal, the power of cultural expectations,
Right.
and even how this story could be told on the big screen.
And hey, you don't have to wait for Hollywood to make that movie.
That's true.
You can start exploring these themes right now.
Yeah.
Maybe check out some other movies on that Paste magazine list.
Mm-hmm.
Or learn more about Malaysian culture. There's
Right.
always more to learn, more to uncover, more to discuss.
That's the beauty of it, right?
Absolutely.
Every deep dive is a journey,
It is.
and it doesn't end when the episode is over.
The exploration continues. It's just the beginning.
So keep those minds curious,
Yes.
and we'll see you next time for another deep dive into the world around us.
And that's a wrap for today's deep dive.
Until next time.
Stay curious and keep exploring.